This man would become known as the Suffolk Strangler. Oh, hi there, stranger. This is part 52 of the England's Whole Lifers list, so viewer discretion is advised. So today I'm telling you about Stephen Gerald James Wright, who was born on the 24th of April 1958 in Norfolk. His dad was a military policeman and his mum was a veterinary nurse. As expected, they moved around a bit, briefly living in Malta and Singapore. When he was 6 years old, Wright's mother left the family and his father would divorce her some 14 years later in 1978. Both of his parents would remarry, but Wright and his 3 siblings stayed with their father. Wright left school at 16 with no qualifications, and so he joined the Merchant Navy. I'm not sure how long he was in the Merchant Navy or what his reasons were for leaving, but he would marry aged 20 and the couple would have a son. 9 years later, in 1987, they would separate and then divorce the same year. This was an eventful time in Wright's love life, as he would also remarry in 1987. But that was also doomed to fail, and the couple would divorce in July of 1988. Cool, blimey, that's a separation, a divorce, another marriage, and another divorce, all in just over a year. I am exhausted just thinking about it. He had many jobs after the Merchant Navy, being a steward on the QE2, a lorry driver, and eventually a forklift driver, which was his profession at the time of his arrest. He had a propensity for S-workers. Since his Merchant Navy days, he had been a patron. I'm assuming this went on throughout his marriages and relationships, but obviously I can't know that for sure. He was troubled with gambling and drink issues, but surprisingly only had one conviction before his arrest. And that was for thieving £80 to pay off a gambling debt. I'm unsure who he stole it from, but that conviction was in 2001. He declared bankruptcy by the late 90s and made 2 attempts on his life, one in 94 and one in the year 2000. He would then meet Pamela Wright, no relation to him, in Felixstowe, and they would become an item, moving to Ipswich together in 2004. And this is what makes this particular case all the weirder for me, is that that's really all we know about him and nothing else crops up until the events in question. When he goes on what seems like a spree from October to December 2006. And that began with Tanya Nicol, who was 19 years old and had last been seen on the 30th of October 2006 in the red light district area of Ipswich. Tanya would be found over 5 weeks later on the 8th of December in Belstead Brook. Belstead Brook is a waterway near Ipswich. The likely cause of her passing was asphyxiation, but drowning could not be ruled out. Gemma Adams was 25 years old and she was the second lady to go missing, but she would be the first to be found. She was last seen on the 14th of November and would be found on the 2nd of December in the same brook as Tanya would later be found in. Again, the likely cause of passing was asphyxiation, but drowning could not be ruled out. Annalie Alderton went missing on the 3rd of December at the age of 24. She would be found in woodland near the A14 on the 10th of December, laid out in a cruciform shape. Annette Nichols was 29 years old when she vanished on the 8th of December 2006. She would be found 4 days later, and it was a fly infestation expert that determined how long she had spent there, 3 or 4 days. She was also in a cruciform shape and had been left in woodland along the A14. Paula Clennell was 24 years old when she was last seen on the 10th of December 2006. It would be only 2 days before her unclothed remains were spotted by a pedestrian who alerted authorities. A police helicopter was dispatched to determine the exact location, and that helicopter would find the remains of Paula Clennell and also from the air locate the remains of Annette Nichols, and that's why both ladies were found on the same day. They were found together as they were only a few hundred yards apart. It was concluded that Paula Clennell's remains were dumped hastily, and that is why she hadn't been posed. Wright would be arrested 1 week later on the 19th of December. He admitted to having intercourse with 4 of the women, and said that he had picked Tanya up to solicit her services, but that he had changed his mind and dropped her off. Forensics got to work and determined that fibres from 2 of the victims matched fibres from Wright's tracksuit and car. Wright, though, had admitted to being in contact with the women and just claimed this to be another unfortunate coincidence. You see, even after he'd been arrested, there was no real aha moment for the police. There was no M weapon. The pathologist couldn't accurately determine the causes of passing of 3 of the victims. They were relying on DNA, but Wright was, according to the prosecutor, tailoring his story to fit around that. However, once the picture was built, it really was either going to be a case of circumstantial evidence or circumstantial coincidence. He admitted to seeing all 5 of the women around the times that they had disappeared. But you see, with Wright, he had picked them up specifically in the order that they had disappeared in, around the times of their disappearances. There were gloves found with the DNA of 2 of the women and Wright's, and it was correctly pointed out that it would have been a highly unusual thing for Wright to have been wearing gloves during consensual intimacy. Another factor was that Pamela, Wright's partner, had been out on every night of these women's disappearances. So although the defence didn't dispute the DNA, they explained it away by saying that Wright had that DNA because he had been soliciting the women's services. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict. Now, if you're anything like me, you will be finding this one a little bit suspicious because the experts, as we know, say that serial unalivers will have started taking lives by their mid-30s. This man supposedly started at the age of 48 and took 5 lives in 6 weeks. And I'm guessing that some people will say that this doesn't fall into that category then, that this is a spree rather than a serial. And the difference between those two is the time frame. A spree will usually occur in a short time frame without any breaks in between, whereas a serial will usually have a cooling off period or a break in between the taking of lives. I would have thought if these were his only unalivings that he would have been the rare mixture of the two, a spree serial. He does have characteristics from both profiles. Now, does it matter? No, of course not. But the psychology does interest me, and so please let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think he's a spree, a serial, or confused? Stephen Gerald James Wright was sentenced to a whole life order on the 22nd of February 2008. Of course, we're not the only ones to think like this, and police did investigate some cold cases that they thought they could potentially link back to Wright. And those investigations have led to Wright being charged with taking another life. He has been charged with the M of 17-year-old Victoria Hall, which happened in 1999. She'd been on her way home from a nightclub in Felixstowe. Remember where Wright met Pam? He's due up in June of this year over that case, but I think the trial is actually set for 2026. Don't worry, I'll be keeping an eye out and I will keep you updated. As ever, rest in peace to the known victims of this case. Tanya Nicol, Gemma Adams, Annalie Alderton, Annette Nichols and Paula Clennell. With 5 known victims and a trial for another, I really think there's more about this guy that we just probably will never know. And I find these ones frightening and infuriating beyond words. This man was described as gentle. Of course, as I said, I will keep you updated on the new trial. As ever, let me know what you think in the comments. And of course, if you stayed with me up until now, then thank you for watching and I will see you for the next one.